Why are you yelling at me?
Where did you put the M&Ms? I hate looking over there because then I get scared. Where did you put the M&Ms?
Hold on 1 second.
Hello, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, guys.
Hi.
Oh, look at James's background with the little books.
Look at that. Oh, wait. I think my camera's not open all the way. There we go. Hi. Look at you two. I'm so
How are
happy to
you?
see you. James,
How
you're
you
not
doing?
smiling.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm just figuring this thing out.
This
Yeah, I
was,
made a mistake. I had to refresh my screen because it's been up for a while. So, and it was just processing.
Yeah. Can I do real quickly? I'm going to share my screen and just let me know if it looks okay, because when I go to share screen, what you're going to see is this going to do like within, because that. Now when I go to this, do you see the slideshow?
Yes, but I see it's not huge.
Right.
I mean,
so
it's not in present.
Right.
Okay.
So if I go here, do you see the slideshow?
Yes.
And
tiny.
It's big? It's tiny? Elsie, it's tiny?
To me, it is.
Screen is just a platform so people can expand to make it bigger for their own.
Okay. But it like fills the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it fills a little screen. We're on top.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the platform. Yeah. And folks are here as well. So.
Oh, really?
Good morning.
We don't see that? Good morning.
There we go. I see attendees. Hi. Hi, Jenna. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Gabrielle. Hi, Sarah. I put a question in the Q&A if you're able to see it. And I'm going to confess straight away, I've never presented where I can't see faces. So I want to see your beautiful faces, but we're so happy you're here.
Yeah.
So I put a question in the chat, just curious, share one thing that excites your child about science or math, or if you don't have your own little humans, maybe a niece or nephew or a little human in your life. So interested to see what sparks joy for those folks. And I think we can go ahead and get started. Do you think we're good to go, Elsie and James?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And of course, once I do, I won't be able to see you, Elsie and James. So give me a shout if you need me to go to the next slide or whatever it is that you need, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all right, excellent. Here we go. And there we go. And just confirm, Elsie and James, you can see the deck good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. So James, you're kicking us off.
Well, good morning, everyone. Glad to be a part of this fantastic event. I was unaware of events like these, so I'm glad to participate and just be with you all today. Please use the chat, as there already is a question in there, and we'll be asking more questions. So please be participatory this morning. I am James Holly Jr. I'm an assistant professor at Wayne State University. I focus on urban STEM education, primarily working with students who desire to be math and science teachers. And so working to help them think through what are some of the way that math and science are taught disadvantages students of different races, ethnicities, and different geographical locations like urban environments where there are many resource disparities. So that's a lot of the work that I do, and I'll let others share.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Just like Leah, it's really strange. I don't see your faces. So welcome. And my name is Elsie Babcock, and I am Wayne State faculty in the math department. And I coordinate STEM for our division. And also, I mean, I've been around a lot of places. I was a teacher in Detroit, a math consultant in Detroit, a math consultant at Wayne County RESA, and also Math Science Center Director. So math and science and technology is in my blood, should I say.
In a very literal sense.
Right.
Exactly. Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Leah Van Bell. I am the executive director with 313 Reads. We are a collective impact coalition to move literacy, equity, and grade level reading here in Detroit. I'm super excited to be here. United Way is one of our backbone organizations along with Brilliant Detroit, so we're really grateful to be here. Science and math are not in my blood, I will confess. I am more of a literary person, but I'm raising a little human being who, from the time he was about 12 months, it's been really obvious he's going to be some kind of engineer. So that's just how he's wired. And so it's been a really interesting journey for me to raise a little human who just sees the world differently than I do. So super excited to be here. My son goes to a public school here in Detroit, and James also has little humans at home, and Elsie also has a son. So we all are also in this space of being parents of little ones or having been parents of little ones and helping engage them around STEM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Holly.
we'll be using this acronym pretty often, and maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't, but the 4 letters of STEM mean science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so I want to be slightly interactive and I placed the question in the chat function. Please, even event organizers, if you can, whoever is here, even Elsie and Leah, if you all wouldn't mind answering, what is science, or what are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to you? How do you understand these disciplines? So maybe a word, a few words, or a sentence. How do you all understand before I share my perspective? Give a few seconds.
And James, I'm trying to see if I can get to the chat on my phone.
Oh,
so.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe I should ask our attendees, are you all able to access the chat? Do you see it? If not, just keep moving forward. So a little more about me, I guess I'll just keep going, is I have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Tuskegee University and a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Michigan State University. And then I went on to get my doctorate in engineering education. And so most of my perspective of how I interact with the STEM disciplines is from an engineering perspective. Okay, well, okay, so they can see the chat, but they cannot see us. All right. Well, yes, feel free to, as we go throughout the presentation, to answer the questions that we post. Or do I need to put in the Q&A? Is that more for the attendees? I don't know. We're just gonna roll. So there are a couple ways, I think, from an academic standpoint to understand what STEM is, and then there's from more how we live our lives. And so from an academic perspective, it's the study of science, the study of technology, engineering, mathematics. It's with science being the physical world around us, as we understand nature, like those things that we did not create, they existed as we came into being, those things that change and evolve over time in the world around us. Technology is more so how do we study those things and then create new things, devices, programs to help us address needs and things that we want to do. So a lot of times technology is referred to as like computers and the internet, but sometimes technologies can be seen as processes or other ways that we interact with each other. So pencils, right, paper, or just various ways that we navigate our world. And then engineering uses science and mathematics to develop machines, to construct bridges and structures, to form our world, to shape our world in a particular way, to advance our society. And then mathematics, there's a lot. Mostly people think of mathematics as just numbers, but there's also a thinking process that goes involved. So it's dealing with quantities, how much of something we have, but also how do we order things, how do we arrange things, how are things geographically in relation to each other, how do things compare to one another, how do we look at trends over time. And so all of these, you possibly could see through my explanations, they're very intertwined and very interrelated. And again, in our lives, aside from the academic study, it's everything around us. So it's very interesting that in school we learn these in isolated ways. Now we see more in the educational space where folks are trying to highlight the ways in which mathematics uses science, or what the ways technology uses science. And so there are more strategies, I guess, or more energy or effort being placed into helping to see not only how are the STEM disciplines interconnected, but also how they translate to our lives, our everyday decision making, the way in which we exist as human beings, more than just taking tests and doing exams. So you can go to the next slide.
And it's interesting, James, just to add one thing, the curriculum standards for science and math also in recent years have become much more cross-cutting than they used to be when most of us went to school. So it's exciting to see that the curriculum that our babies are learning in school is really looking at how these things knit together in meaningful ways too.
Absolutely. When I was working at RISA with the math science consultant, he would always say there's a lot of math and science, and I would say, no, David, there's a lot of science in the math. And of course we use technology. So James, I agree that all of them should be integrated, and we do teach them in isolation. Our goal is to support families, and not only to explore, but to develop a joy and appreciation for reading. And it's also important that they see parents, you as aunts or uncles read without them, okay? We also, we've included books on science, technology, and like James said, I mean, we say STEM, and we use the words or we speak the words separately, but it's also all integrated. STEM, the books, sounds technical. You would think they would be technical or what I consider schooly, but there's plenty of resources and text out there that are fictional and non-fictional books that have characters that children can relate to, and they're fun. They have a fun storyline, and they're full of adventures and misadventures that spark and STEM. Okay. And also we're going to explore a free print and video resources. Leah?
Thanks, Elsie. So we wanted to just talk briefly about why we read aloud to our babies. I used to be a classroom teacher, and my favorite grades to teach were 3rd and 4th grade. I always said that they were old enough to understand sarcasm, but still young enough to like to snuggle. So it's a fun group. But I remember talking with the families of my students, and they would say, well, you know, Leah, why would I read aloud to them? They can read now at this grade. And so what we want to lift up is that whether our kids are from birth, you know, through elementary school, even middle school and beyond, reading aloud is really important. And so we just want to highlight a few things. The one thing is it builds positive relationships. So there's something about snuggling up, sharing a book, talking about it, making it part of your family routine. And research has shown that it actually does strengthen parent-child interactions. So that's pretty lovely. It's a pretty low-lift kind of way to have some great bonding with your children. The other thing is it builds vocabulary. So there are a lot of, I call them juicy words that we encounter in books that we don't use in everyday life, right? I don't talk like books talk normally. And so our kids encounter those in text. And so, like, for instance, this morning, my son, who's a 1st grader, he says something about apparatus. And I said, how do you know that word? I'm thinking, I don't go around talking about apparatus, but we must have read it in a book. So it builds the foundation of reading. And the really interesting thing about reading is that kids do need to have things like understanding about how sounds work and how letters and sounds work together. But another foundational piece is vocabulary, because even if you can sound out the word or look for chunks in it and figure it out, if it's not in your vocabulary, if you don't know what apparatus means, it doesn't do you much good to sound it out, right? So the vocabulary building is just so important with those juicy words that we just don't normally use in everyday talk. At least I don't. Maybe James, you and Elsie do, because you're.
No.
Can I comment on that as well?
Yeah, please.
So when I work, that's actually very critical, because when I work with the students or teach students in science and mathematics, I try to help them understand that they're teaching their students, or they will be teaching their students in a particular language, right? So not only are there particular words to that discipline or that subject matter, but there's also words that may seem to have a understanding and outside of that discipline, that it means something different within the discipline. For example, in mathematics, you use the term mean to describe the average. And so or mode, mean, mode, and median are terms that are used in mathematics regularly for descriptive statistics. Now, those words in everyday language have a certain meaning and certain context, connotations, but in mathematics, they mean something different, right? And so it's very critical, like you're training students in how to, in some ways, be bilingual or trilingual, or whatever the case may be. They use their everyday language, but they're also learning the language of the discipline, because oftentimes that's a way that certain students are excluded because they don't speak the language of the discipline in the class.
And James, I'm really glad you used that word exclusion, because a big part of this is about access and equity. And so we know that in Detroit, that grade level reading at 3rd grade hovers around 15.7%, when the state average is around 46%. But the reason for that isn't that our babies aren't brilliant and capable. It's that they don't always have access to everything they need, and we're all committed to making sure that they do, right? And so part of that is, do they have access to some of that, vocabulary? And so that's really important. So it also becomes this equity issue, right? And another thing too that I see as an equity issue is the book talk piece of it. So when we talk about grammar, you know, we all speak, you know, a dialect, which is sort of an informal way of talking, but we want our babies to be able to move in and out of multiple dialects, and they're all equally valid. So I do this thing, it's a very Michigan thing. I say, I'm gonna go to Starbucks. What do you want, Elsie? Right? I don't know what I'm gonna looks like on the written page, because that is not book talk, right? And so by reading aloud, our kids understand that, like, oh, like formal book talk sounds a little bit different than when I say amina, right? And so basically that's another kind of currency. So they have to develop an ear for that before they can write that. We don't want to say in any way that, you know, one way of speaking or writing is better than another, but it's currency, it's capital, right? So it's also building that in a really low lift, you know, organic, loving kind of way. The other thing is background knowledge. So as we're reading books about STEM to our kids, they're building a lot of background knowledge about things in the world that then help them understand content area and reading. And then the big thing is just joy for books and reading. So important. So one of the things that we've highlighted in this, all these images that are in our decks are from books that are in an annotated bibliography that we're going to give you. So it's like a list of books. It's a book list with little descriptions and information about the books. But these are all great books for kids. And this one you can see has won 2 Coretta Scott King Book Awards, one for the author, one for the illustrator. It is fun. And I remember when I first started teaching many years ago, science books and biographies and books that had math in them, they were really dry and really boring. Like no child would want to pick them up by choice. But now, like, they're beautifully illustrated, beautifully written, and so it's really different. So that joy piece is important. And then why informational books? So one of the things that sometimes we forget about is that as we're going through our daily lives as adults, we may love fiction, we may love poetry or drama, but more than 99% of what we read in daily life is informational text. So think about whether it's, and it doesn't even have to be work related. So let's put work aside, right? But it's things like a recipe, directions to get somewhere, looking up online, to Grubhub to see what the menu is, you know, what the hours of something are. We get a new medication. We're looking at, you know, okay, what are potential side effects? Like so much of what we read is informational text. And so there's been an important shift in the curriculum for our babies. So it used to be, mostly all of what they read in school was fiction, which is good stuff. I love fiction, but there would only be like one informational text unit a year. And I called it the, oh crud, it's spring, we better read something informational before the school year ends, right? But now the standards have been redone so that actually a large portion of it is engaging them in really rich, wonderful informational text reading and writing. And then the other thing is, some kids just prefer informational text over fiction. And for a long time, they've really been marginalized in classrooms. And I don't want to gender it and say it's more boys than girls, but we just know that some kids prefer it. You know, my son Langston loves informational books. We'll read them again and again to the point that they're falling apart and we're taping them back together. And he does enjoy fiction very much, but he's definitely an informational text person. And Elsie and James, I'm wondering, because you're more of the, your way of thinking is different than mine. Did you like informational text more than fiction when you were kids?
Repeat that, Leah.
When you were kids, did you prefer informational text more than fiction?
No, not for me.
Not for you?
No, I loved fictional text.
Okay. What about you, James?
Yeah, I actually didn't read much when I was little, so I didn't like any text that much. Now I'm more so into. I'm pretty consistent across the board. Yeah, now I'm more.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't read much when I was little.
Okay. And I think about this when I was a classroom teacher, that when I first started teaching, because I loved fiction so much, I filled my classroom library with like books I found at garage sales, and when libraries were closing, they always have great like books for nothing. So I filled my classroom with these books I could get my hands on. But then I realized they were mostly fiction, because I had students who would say, Miss Leah, I want to read about animals, or I want to read about volcanoes or space. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I don't have stories about that or books about that. So it really challenged me to expand the books I made available even in my classroom. And the other reason we read informational books is it builds STEM knowledge. And we know that reading and math get very much prioritized in the curriculum and in teaching and learning time, and they're deeply important. Those are core skills. And often science sort of gets pushed to the back, particularly. And so by reading and talking about it, we continue to build that understanding. And I want to say, as a former teacher, I'm not critiquing teachers. It's just, sometimes there's only so much time in the day and folks have to prioritize things. But when we read about it with enjoyable text, we continue to support our teachers and what they're teaching. And then this I wanted to share because I think sometimes families worry about, I don't know if I want to read these science books to kids or math books because I might not understand those concepts myself. And so what I want to say is, I was the teacher who, when I was teaching science, and I remember the first time I had to teach the rock cycle, I was like, wait, there's a rock cycle? I know about the water cycle. There's a rock cycle? There's a rock cycle. I had to look it up, research it, get books, and I taught myself about the rock cycle so I could teach it to my babies. But the great thing about these really fun books is we don't have to know all the content or the vocabulary. We can learn it with them. It can be co-learning. And this is actually a picture of a book that I've been reading to Langston. It's called 100 Questions About Space, and he loves it. But we were reading this, and if you look at this, this chart on the side, you can see that the hottest lava is about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's very hot. Diamonds melt at 6,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit. The Earth's inner core is hotter than the surface of the sun. When we read that, I was like, wait, what? How is the Earth's inner core hotter than the surface of the sun? Like, that made no sense to me. I literally Googled it to confirm the book was correct. It is correct. So, but it was great because I was able to model for Langston, buddy, I didn't know that. Like, this is really cool. And then it was this great conversation about where like the heat of other things lies. And it was just this really like organic, cuddled up in bed, reading a book kind of moment. So I didn't know all the answers. And I actually had a misunderstanding about this. But really it's more about showing our babies the joy of what lifelong learning looks like. We do not have to have all the answers, but we can show excitement for like, wow, that's really cool. Or, let's learn more about that. Mm-hmm. So it's that modeling. Were you going to say something, James? Okay. And James, this is you. Uh-oh, did it cut out? Oh.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, things are freezing, and so I don't know if it was me or. Yeah, so I'm curious how people felt, and I mean, you had to put this in the chat, but I'm curious when folks saw talking about the joy of books through science literacy, because oftentimes it seems oxymoronic, right? Having joy and dealing with science or math and so on, and so that's what we want to kind of reverse, that type of way of engaging with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Because oftentimes when it comes to the science or the mathematics, parents may feel like I'm not capable, I'm not competent. Because that's why what Leah was just sharing is very critical to learn together. But also a lot of why we feel that way or parents feel that way is due to how you were taught in school, right? And where it was just about the content, it wasn't about who you are. It wasn't about how this information related to your life outside of school. You weren't able to bring your own ingenuity, creativity, and personality into the classroom. And so we're in a space now where there are a lot more books that allow us to do that easily. And we want to encourage youth in that way to say that science is bigger and broader than the historical ways it's been presented. And so what also we know is historically certain groups or certain people groups may not have a high representation of folks that identify like them in the STEM fields. So across all the STEM fields, what that usually looks like in terms of race is that white people are the most dominant, right? Heavily overrepresented, and other groups are less represented. And so what that means is there's a small chance, it's not impossible, but there's a small chance that you have someone in your neighborhood, in your community, that attends your church or community center who works in this particular area. So the exposure to these disciplines, those informal exposure areas, right, where you can ask questions. What do you do at work? Can you help me solve this problem? So it's not just about school, but it's life experiences. When you don't have someone who is engaged in that field or discipline, that's informal learning that you would normally get, you're locked out of that. And gender is used; these are male-dominated fields, right? In terms of disability, these are fields where people have, function of their bodies, or they don't have any mental disabilities or anything like that. That people without disabilities are considered able-bodied. And so what that means is there's a chance that folks who identify outside these race and gender identities may not believe that they can pursue these disciplines, right? Or they can pursue careers, or they may not believe that they are capable of doing the work, like understanding this information. And so what books do, or what some of the books that we're showing, is they counteract that type of thinking. And so they show folks of varied races and ethnicities. They show folks of various gender identities. They show folks with abilities and disabilities, so that that visual representation can be an affirmation that anyone is capable. If there's a problem with people doing it, it's not because of the human beings. It's not because of you. It's because of some policies or what other people are doing, the way that they teach or exclude. So that's one. Secondly, it reveals hidden stories of history and creativity. So the first book, I see, Vanita, you said that you like the book about Catherine. It's a computer called Catherine. And so
That's a great book.
Yeah, it comes from the movie Hidden Figures that was released. Was it like 2016? It's been a few years now. Kind of crazy. But that book revealed the story of these Black women who were few actually a lot of them. There were a lot of them, but they were not known to be so critical to our space exploration, our advanced technologies, and science understandings. And so we just passed or came out of Black History Month. Usually that's the time where we learn all these stories, all this information about great things that Black people have done. But it's not just Black people, right? There's a lot of people who have contributed to the society in which we live in various ways. And so books allow us, from biographies to just general texts like this one, Have You Thanked the Inventor Today, to help children get a better understanding of the ways that diverse people have contributed to the world we live in. Another one is Lonnie Johnson, the whoosh, the creator of the Super Circle or water gun, was a Black man. So a lot of people don't know that this toy that they regularly engage with was created by a Black man, and he has quite an interesting story as well, also a Tuskegee alum. So it's not just about the text of the book, but it's also the context that we're learning in and how it addresses some cultural realities. We learn subject matter without pressure of testing. So Leah talked about how science gets pushed to the side and reading and mathematics are prioritized in school. That has a lot to do with the testing culture. So hyper emphasize standardized tests cause teachers to say, hey, I believe that all this information is important, but my job hinges on my students performing well on these particular tests. And so that begins to drive the curriculum for not only teachers in their classroom, but schools, districts, and so on, right? When you have funding, right, your school can't get the resources it needs unless your kids do well on these tests, then that's going to drive and really constrain what you cover in school. And so this is a way to still ensure that our children get the learning and information that they need, is to provide these diverse books that they don't have to worry about taking the test. They don't have, we're not going to quiz them. We might ask them to kind of repeat some information or have multiple touch points, but they can look at something and look at it again, and look at it again. Or they can look at something and not look at it again. It's up to them, but they have the flexibility to engage in a very free form way. So again, to retain the joy, right? Some ways in class, our identities are constricted. And so now in our homes, it's more comfortable, right? You're not teaching your mother, your father, your cousin, sister, brother, auntie, uncle, or whatever. And so they may be more relaxed in how they process the information. And then lastly, it builds a foundation for career skills. So Leah talked about her son Langston, his interest in becoming an engineer. And so he's getting a lot of foundational knowledge and exposure that is, they're different deposits in his mind. He may not recall on them next year or in high school, but they're building a foundation so that he is prepared, one, to fight or resist anxiety around this. So a lot of times if we're unfamiliar, it's not that we can't do it, it's just the newness of it builds an anxiety for our children, even for us as adults, to interact with this information. So she's addressing that, but also he has the language, right, to be able to talk. But then they're going quite deep in terms of the content formation. So it's not just language to name things, but he's able to see how certain discipline, subject matter, I should say, or certain principles in these disciplines relate to each other. So when he gets to school, or as he goes on to a career, he will be able to navigate that space in a way where he's not just a novice, but he feels confident that he can engage, and he can demonstrate that through his knowledge. So these are very critical. Even though I work in STEM education, I'm not one who advocates that STEM is going to save the world, right? It's helpful. I believe that all things are important, all subject matter, but it's very important that we have some understanding on how I guess, a competency or ability to work with this information in various ways.
James, I absolutely agree. My baby is actually 29, getting ready to bridge over, right? But in our home, we always read books. He liked the science part of it, and as most boys do, and some girls with the dinosaurs and the rocks and things like that. But Brandon, very early on, he, without pushing him, or he excelled in math, science, and reading. Okay. As a matter of fact, when he was in elementary, his reading, when they tested him, he was reading at a high school level. Okay. So yes, books can, and I'm going to, Leah talked about.
Elsie,
Yes.
can I just say one thing? I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I just want to name one thing. So some of these books kids will read on their own, and that's wonderful. But the other thing is, like, we're encouraging read aloud, right? So we're reading above the child's independent reading level. So although, for instance, my son loves science and engineering, he started really strong with reading, but due to COVID and learning remotely, that's been really hard for him. Has really regressed in some ways with reading, and so now he's getting some community-based tutoring through Brilliant Detroit. That's been really helpful. So what I really want to help us name is that a lot of these books are books that our babies won't be able to read, but we can read to them, and they can continue to build the vocabulary and all the kinds of background knowledge and STEM knowledge and joy that we're talking about. And then it makes it easier when they do then come to read this kind of book, because they do have the understanding to help navigate it. So I just want to name that kids may have really high science interests, but maybe struggling in readers. And so this is a way to help bridge that.
Oh, absolutely, because Brandon didn't start off reading, okay? We read to him, and plenty of books, and we didn't stop. So he became a lover of books also. But I know James and Leah talked about books, non-fictional books, informational books, but also books. There's a lot of books out there that are based on fiction that can spark an interest and a curiosity in science, technology, engineering, and math in a fun and engaging way. But one thing I do want to encourage is when you read a piece of literature, just read it for the enjoyment of listening and talking about what's in the story, okay? Instead of trying to focus on the math or the science or the technology, because it will come. So I'm going to share with you, if you haven't heard this story, it is a fictional context. It has a fictional context, but it's very, very interesting. And I want you to think about it as you're listening to it. What do you think about? What ideas would it spark in a young person? So Leah, did Leah go back? Leah went away?
Yeah, I think she stepped away briefly.
Oh, really? Oh, Okay, so the story is Ida Twist, a scientist. So as soon as she comes back, we're going to listen to that story. But we can't even advance the slides, right, James? Oh, there she is. Leah, we're ready for the story.
We can't hear you.
Uh-oh, technical difficulties?
Yeah, we don't hear anything if you played it.
Yeah.
We can't hear you either, Leah.
Technology is fun. We can't hear you.
No.
No.
It's okay. Did you want to just talk about the story, Elsie?
Yeah, I want them to, and I didn't even bring the book with me, but I wanted them to get something out of it's not just the context of the story, but it's when you hear it, okay, as if you were doing a read aloud. But anyway, it's a little girl who's very, very curious, and she's always asking why. And finally, her parents, I mean, she would ask why, and she would try and figure out how things work. And one time she got in a bit of trouble because she tried to figure out a way to make her stinky cat smell good. And so her parents said, okay, no more asking why, no more this. And so it ends it's a really nice ending. But I wanted you to hear the verbal cues. So while Leah is figuring this out,
No, we cannot.
No.
I'm saying we might have to just continue because we have 7 minutes, I believe.
Yes. Okay, so then let's continue, Leah. Yeah. Okay, oh, that's so much fun. Okay, so there are a lot of fictional books that can also spark interest in the STEM fields, and Leah has included them on the book list. But Dr. Bishop, she's a literary person also, but she wrote about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. You don't usually hear the sliding glass doors part, but this is what James was talking about. As you're reading a book, the mirror is that the child can see themselves in this book as this character. They can see what black and brown black and brown children, okay, or adults have contributed to the STEM fields. So that's one way. And with the windows, not only can they see out, but others can see them. They can see the underrepresented groups that they haven't seen in the past, okay? They see themselves represented in a positive way and connect to what is possible, okay? For us, it opens up a world that has no boundaries, which is exciting, okay? And yes, we can excel too, all right? So, and the sliding glass doors, we can go, and the reason why she added that is we can go in and out of these different worlds or STEM fields or see ourselves, and others can see us. We're more visible. Leah? Oh, if Leah can't talk. Leah?
Well, we'll just cover. So if you can get the next one, and then I'll get the digital access slide.
Okay. Next.
It's unfortunate.
Next.
They're not going.
They're not moving.
No. Now there we go. So if you can slide 12, you get it. Yeah.
Okay, so
If you go back one.
Go back one. Okay, so this is that's okay. This is Saturday, right? Okay. So this is how, I mean, these visual representation shows you different ethnicities and how the percentage that we have seen in books. And as you can tell, in 2018, we have more visibility in terms of the text. And probably in 2020, it's even more. So we are represented.
Okay, so closing out, or basically at the end, wanted to share resources. So the STEM book list is the annotated list that Leah discussed, and she's pulling that up right now. That shows just a long list. Some books I have, some I do not. And so we, as we said, that they're out there. We also want to point you to where they are and help you see, give you a brief synopsis or the summary of what the book is about. Because, some books are more biographical, some are fictional stories, and some, they cross the different disciplines. So this is a great resource that Leah and Elsie put together, which I am impressed by tremendously. But we just want to tell you that they're out there. We want you to ease the engagement, right, and familiarity and comfort level. Also, we have information about how to connect with the Detroit. Yeah, I see. Hold on. How to connect with the Detroit Public Library. And then the three at the bottom are 3 YouTube links for Read Aloud. So we talked about Read Aloud, and I read aloud to my daughters, but some, usually teachers and other folks have, I believe, a gift in reading books aloud, where it's very interactive, it's very exciting. So when I read, it's kind of like, I'm just reading the words, try to do a little character here and there. But these folks, they have quite a diverse array of books. So I have a lot of books on my personal shelf, as well as you can see here. These are some children's books. So we have a kind of home library. But this takes us beyond what we can do in this house, right? Because books take up space. So the YouTube links allow greater exposure to the vast array of books that are out there. And those particular 3 links they feature books that predominantly, I'd say mostly, are by Black authors and feature Black characters, but not entirely. There are also other folks as well. But I particularly want to highlight the representation and the vast array of diverse ways in which Black people have engaged. And so those are 3 of my favorites. And I believe we will end there. So we had a question, but due to time, we'll just kind of close it out. I don't know if you have, well, at least Elsie, if you have any last words. Leah, if you want to type something. No, we still can't hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we might have to log off and then log back in. We have a couple of minutes to do that, but hopefully you have enjoyed the presentation, and we have resources for you. And I think, Leah, they can download this deck or listen to it later.
She said it's in the documents folder. She said the STEM book list is in the documents folder for people to access.
Okay, so that's good.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Right. Yeah, take care. I guess you stop the broadcast.
Leah, we can't hear you.